Welcome to this Ask the Expert session here at Microsoft Ignite. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be covering an opportunity to ask the experts on how to manage risk, securing information across your environment. We've heard a lot of things today. We've heard about protecting privacy, innovating with security, protecting the security of data. And it really goes back to Vasu's keynote message about security for all, integrating security and that kind of compliance focus across all solutions and all clouds. With that, we've got to cover some housekeeping as we get started in this live session. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions of the experts here from Microsoft. Use the Q&A panel to bring up your questions. We have chat moderators standing by. Our experts will engage with answers in the panel, in addition to the ones that we can get to here live during the time that we have allotted. Once your question gets answered, you'll either hear that answer on the stream or you'll see that answer pop up in the window. Just note that this is a many user environment as part of this conference, so we ask you to adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. That Microsoft Code of Conduct just expects reasonable practices. With that, we have a great panel joining us today. I am your moderator, Wayne Anderson. I'm a security and compliance architect with the Microsoft 365 Center of Excellence. Enrique, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Enrique Sagesse. I'm a program manager with the Information Protection Security and Compliance Group, the engineering group that builds products such as Microsoft Information Protection or DLP solutions, Insider Risk Management, etc. And I'm part of Mavi's team, who will be introduced next.
Fantastic. Mavi.
Hi, thank you, Enrique. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Mavi, and I lead the MIP and Compliance CXC team. Super excited to be here. And going to Ron.
Thanks, Mavi. I'm Roman Cleon. I'm on the Microsoft 365 product marketing team and excited to be here.
Excellent. Fantastic. So as we're getting together today, right, we saw co-authoring for secure documents announced, and we saw a lot of focus on Azure Purview, new features, the ability to extend into new clouds. You know, if I'm a business leader, Mavi, how can I start expanding the work and directing my operations team to be doing something new or different or transformative with the announcements we have today?
Thank you, and that's a great question. We're very excited to announce the availability of co-auth today, which enables more productivity to our customers. And you know, Microsoft Information Protection is a wide platform, but it's also fully integrated with your existing M365 and Azure environments. What I suggest to all our customers is go and read all the deployment acceleration guides that we have today, how to enable, you know, MIP sensitivity labels that integrate across the board, as well as in Azure Purview, that can go ahead and classify and protect your blobs and storages in Azure. This will help you get an end-to-end solution in supporting all classification labels across the board, and also will help your employees to basically collaborate without affecting productivity. So you're still protected and secured, but your company is still productive. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And, you know, as the business seeks to better protect documents while preserving productivity, we've got to look carefully for when that misuse occurs. We've seen today's announcements on policy enhancements, the new analytics features and insider risk management. Where did today's policy enhancements speed and focus targeting of potential data risks? Raman.
Yeah, Wayne, good question. So, you know, we recently completed a survey of about 1,200 CISOs in the United States and or North America, actually. And what we found from that survey was that 93% of them are concerned about insider risks within their organization. Not only that, but 66% are very concerned. And so these kinds of issues around both inadvertent and malicious types of risks to sensitive data from insiders within your organization are continue to be top of mind for these companies and for these leaders. And so, one of the things that we're really excited about announcing today is the availability of analytics within insider risk management. So insider risk management in Microsoft 365 is a solution that we launched last February to help organizations identify and manage and mitigate insider risks such as, accidental or malicious data leakage, confidentiality data breach, or, theft of intellectual property within the organization. And so today we launched, or, it's rolling out to tenants worldwide, a feature capability referred to as analytics, which allows organizations to run a daily scan across their Microsoft 365 audit logs and get visibility into potential risks that might be happening within the organization. So we could show you, and by leveraging that scan, which then our machine learning engine basically correlates the activities against different models that we have, to say, hey, X% of your organization is showing exfiltration patterns. They're leaking sensitive data or they're downloading sensitive data. You may want to go configure policies to understand what might be happening in more detail. Or, Y% of your organization that has left or has a resignation date is showing exfiltration patterns. And so this gives you more visibility into the hidden risks that might be going on within your organization to help better inform the policies that you should go and put into place to then, not only identify them, but then collaboratively work across HR, security, legal to mitigate those threats.
Makes a lot of sense. Enrique, it really brings up something that we've seen a lot of customers come to the table and ask, right? We've worked together, you and I, helping customers with unified DLP at scale. Recently, the team has released the deployment accelerator guides. And as we see customers maturing, starting to consider that guidance, what's the biggest opportunity in your view for large enterprise customers to tune information protection and DLP deployments to better protect data security at scale? You're on mute.
Accidentally. So sorry about that. I think the biggest opportunity there in terms of deploying unified DLP and Microsoft Information Protection is to deploy these solutions not as isolated technologies, but having a more holistic view. We often see companies that try to completely understand and grasp and assess and test one technology, deploy it to the full depth, and then move on to the next. And where we're seeing most success is actually doing the opposite. Start on the very high level of all these technologies, design them together to get the basics right across the different products. So for example, you can deploy basic labeling, manual labeling with not very aggressive protection, automatic classification of what's obvious. And then at the same time you're doing that, deploy basic common sense DLP policies, not only as isolated or separate DLP policies that consider what's sensitive in the content and the normal behaviors that you will deploy with DLP, but also considering what you have just done for labeling and saying, for example, if something is unlabeled and it may contain sensitive data, block it. If something is unlabeled or something is improperly labeled for the type of sensitive data it contains, also block it. That allows you to disrupt the business to a minimum because users can handle even exceptions or potentially scenarios that you didn't think of, and yet get a significant level of protection. And only after you have done that, after you have deployed these technologies to a basic level, move on to the next step, adjust the cranks and essentially figure out what's the next iteration of that. For example, being more aggressive with the protection in the labels, adding things like exact data matching for more aggressive and accurate classification of information, etc. And that way, you are always on a stable functional level in which you get the most of the functionality with a minimum effort. And at the same time, you get synergies like, for example, leveraging the labels that your users apply to assess whether something is being properly or accidentally shared.
You know, it's funny that you bring up efficiency, Enrique, because it's very apt. A lot of the organizations that I'm talking to, senior executives, CISOs, are in a place where initially their budget really wasn't affected by COVID, or if it was, for a lot of these companies, there was slight upside as they responded to remote work. But now they're being asked to simplify and they're being asked to streamline. They're looking for opportunities to bring that efficiency into play. And Raman, it really brings a question to my mind. We saw analytics today. How should a CISO be thinking about using that analytics capability, those quick snapshots, to speed their recognition of maybe threats that are in the enterprise they weren't aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question, Wayne. So we actually had a conversation with a customer about 3 weeks ago, and it was a CISO here in the United States, fairly large organization. And one of the things that he said was, you know, hey, look, for me, identifying insider risks is about accelerating time to action. So your question is spot on. That's what they're concerned about. It's like, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time in configuring scripts. I don't want to spend a lot of time in deploying agents and collecting signals, ingesting all these things. I want to be able to scope in the users that I'm concerned about, or I want to be able to identify the risks that are of the highest importance to my organization. That's where analytics comes in. Analytics can tell you, here's the risks that are happening within your organization, help you focus. Then you take one of the built-in templates that we have and scope in the user, scope in the signals that you want to be able to have the system correlate for you so that you can spend time on investigating the alerts. You're not spending time on scripting all these different endpoints or deploying all these agents, because with insider risk management, there are no agents to deploy. We're built into the Windows 10 desktop. We can get signals from there. We can get signals from Microsoft 365 workloads. Not only that, but all of this is presented in a way where privacy is built in. It's an opt-in solution. Pseudo-anonymization is on by default. And then we've got strong role-based access controls. Finally, once you do identify an alert, to your point about, hey, I might have a single pane of glass. I might be using, you know, Azure Sentinel. Well, with Microsoft 365 Insider Risk Management today, you can export alerts from the Microsoft 365 Insider Risk Management solution into the Management Activity API and consume them into Azure. And then that way you get alerts across the board. But that's really sort of the key, is like accelerating the time to action, not spending a lot of time on configuration, scripting, and deployment management, all kinds of things, is so important. The last thing I'll say here is that, you know, today many organizations are using a fractured landscape of different types of solutions, from UABA to user activity monitoring to DLP. And what they really want is basically that one single pane of glass, and they want the collaboration aspects. Because once you do identify an alert, it's so important to be able to then, you know, engage with HR and legal to remediate that. And that's another efficiency gain, because you don't have to deploy yet another solution on top of it.
All right. You know, it brings up a question to my mind, and it's funny because Dean here in the audience apparently had a mind running a similar track. Right, as we think about bringing that protection across multiple clouds, he's really raising, how do I take that insider risk detection? How do I think of that alongside the things that I'm doing for Azure? Is there integration? Is there crossover? You know, is there efficiency that I should be thinking about programmatically?
So today, I think, you know, as you think about the Azure and insider risk management integration, it is really through that activity management API, right? You would be able to export an alert and bring it into Azure. And from there, I think that's one of the things as we think forward is like, hey, another aspect that we have is actually Power Automate. So we have Power Automate templates built into insider risk management. There's 4 templates out of the box that you can use to automate some of these processes. You could actually create an automation script to push to a SIEM system if you wanted, right? Or push out an activity management alert to Azure. And so that's how I would think about that in the interim, until we, maybe in the future we might have more native integration there.
Makes a lot of sense. And, Mavi is just kind of continuing this theme and the thought of kind of this approach to security for all. We really heard Aleem talking about that, protecting the security of data. If somebody wanted to get actionable and turn around and say, what do I do on Monday? Like I go to Ignite, I get all this great information, I take Friday to think about it, and then I go to the office and I do something. What are those immediate next steps to look at their Microsoft 365 tenant, look at their larger data estate, and protect that data and kind of compliance readiness across clouds?
Right. That's a perfect question. So as we also describe in our deployment acceleration guides, we're recommend on the crawl, walk, around attitude. That means first you need to create your deploy sensitivity labels across your org. You can do that by, going to the SEC portal and create them and then understand what you have. We have the analytics portal that helps you understand what sensitive information you have in your environment. And the same first day experience that we have with insider risk management, so you know where you're at any given point of time. This is the first thing that I would do. Second thing is identify this sensitive information across your organization. What is stored, where is it stored, what you need to do. And everything is either on Office apps or in Azure and everything. Same goes for Azure Purview, of course, in M365 as well. And then last but not least is configure DLP policies and rules and auto label everything, because we highly recommend that you auto label, because then you don't need to trust your end users. You don't need to think about what's going on, what you need to do. Things will just work out of the box automatically, and then you can just go ahead and then create more and more complex rules and scenarios to cover whatever you need. But first, as I said, start by knowing your data, then go and protect your data. And I've heard so many from so many customers saying, hey, you know what, Mavi? I don't care what's going on inside my organization. The thing that I worry about the most is what happens to the data once it leaves my organization. And here's where the DLP policy comes to place. And last but not least, talking about DLP, and I know Enrique covered that and Raman talked a little bit about this, we're going to have a unified DLP webinar coming up. So if someone really wants to understand Microsoft's unified DLP story, whether it's the on-prem DLP, whether it's the integration with MCAS for non-Microsoft party apps, whether it's for our endpoint DLP or even Teams DLP, we're having a webinar on March 17th. I will post here in the chat window in a minute the ICS files, so you can go ahead and download and join us on March 17th.
Fantastic. Great. Join the webinar, learn more about the new technology. That's fantastic. And Enrique, Dean asked another great question, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to address this. Sensitivity labels are the backbone of an information protection strategy as you apply Microsoft's tools. Should the same sensitivity labels really be applied to containers and files, right? There are a lot of options out there about approaching the way to apply the label. When do we use which one?
Well, that's a great question, and one I wish we had asked ourselves sooner, because I think we got this wrong from the start. We assumed that everybody was going to be using the same labels for documents and containers always. We essentially saw no reason for doing it otherwise, but customers thought us that that wasn't the case, and many customers decided to use different sets of labels. Now, also, many customers use the same set of labels for containers and for documents. And it depends on the organization. But what we're seeing is that while some we have customers that fall on both sides, what's critical is that they use the same language. This actually the same terminology and the same label taxonomy, even though the labels themselves might be different. And the reason for them being different, for example, could be that you want more granularity in the labels used for protecting and labeling documents, whereas for containers and sites and things like that, you probably want just a few labels to divide what's internal from what's external, that kind of thing. But what you should not do is to create language that differs from one another. the language of labels is one of the most critical elements in the creation of a program or of a plan for deploying labels. And it needs to be something that resonates with users, that is adopted as common language. If you say, well, I'm going to be talking about confidential, highly confidential, or secret versus top secret, whatever you define, it needs to work for your users and needs to become a standard, something that's going to last 30, 40 years in your company. And you're not going to achieve that if you start using conflicting language. Like for sites, you refer to private, public versus external. And then for documents, you're talking about confidential, NDA, and like that kind of thing is a challenge for users to deal with. So defining the same taxonomy, the same language, and then you might create different labels for documents and containers if you think that you might need to have different levels of granularity or adjust things differently in one case or the other.
Fantastic. You know, as we, the client's freezing up. There we go. Fantastic. So as we kind of approach the organization and we look at supported file types for cloud app security, information protection policies. Currently, the technology only works with Microsoft Office file types, and this is something we hear from our customers all the time. And an anonymous user in the audience has asked the question, Mavi, you know, how should the organization think about kind of the barriers to adding other file types? You know, can you help us understand the roadmap here?
Yeah, so obviously our plan is go beyond just, you know, Office files and you know, support more and more file types. Today we're doing this with some support of partners and with our MIP SDK. And there is a plan to support more and more. I cannot share right now, you know, the roadmap and timelines. However, I do ask that if there's a specific request for a specific file type support, that, you know, you can reach out to me or even to Enrique and just let us know, you know, what file type you need us to support, because that will help us with prioritization with the engineering team. But obviously the plan is not just, you know, one small Microsoft org.
Fantastic. So, you know, today we actually released as a bunch a number of enhancements to insider risk management. And in fact, in the announcements, you're going to see an announcement come through here that'll link you straight through to the blog article. And one of the things that caught my eye here, Roman, is watching the watchers, right? There's this paragraph in there about removing bias from the process and looking at the audit trail of those who are involved as analysts in the technology. It's not immediately apparent, right? It doesn't jump off the page and say, oh, look, this is a big feature. But for the integrity of a security organization, this is actually important. Can you help us dig into that next layer of why and what a business needs from this?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been one of the highest priority requests that we've received from customers that are using this worldwide, especially customers actually across the board. I was going to say regulated, but even other customers, right? So think about it as if I'm the security analyst and I'm looking at alerts and I see an alert from Wayne, you know, that comes up on my screen, I'm going to escalate that alert no matter what. I don't care what's happening there. It's Wayne Anderson. He's getting flagged and I'm pushing it out. Now, is that biased? Is that discrimination, or what is that? And that's where a lot of organizations are like, look, we need to have some checks and balances in this process, right? We need to know that these analysts who have, you know, visibility into these alerts are doing the right thing, because sometimes they could be biased, they could be discriminatory, they could be in collusion with somebody, right? If I imagine I'm a security analyst and my good friend and engineering partner Talal shows up on the screen and we're colluding together to go do something, you know, malicious. Well, that's something that, you know, the organization might want to know. So we released a auditor role as part of this particular release, and that allows you to look at the audit logs associated with insider risk actions that are being taken by the analyst or others within the solution. So you can go back and say, hey, this looks like it might be suspicious activity by the watcher. And that has been something that to remove any of that discrimination, the bias, or any of that out of the solution so that it is really a factual evidence-based product is what we wanted to achieve. And that's, we're excited about that.
Fantastic. Enrique, we've got a question that's come in here from our live Ignite audience around the Content Explorer, right? Content Explorer shows a lot of different sensitive info types. And as an organization, especially if you're at scale, there are going to be a lot of files, a lot of groups, a lot of people doing different things. And so there's this sense that the amount of data that's in there can be overwhelming or on first glance, it doesn't seem relevant. How do you separate out the things that are most important from the larger display of all the sensitive info type matches that are being shown in Content Explorer?
A good question. It's something that we've been working on for a while now. We recognize that especially as we add more and more sensitive information types, we keep expanding the pool and customers keep creating their own custom sensitive information types. Not only they are seeing listed sensitive information types that are not relevant to them, but also they are seeing that we show documents that contain, for example, low confidence of an instance of a sensitive information type, which might not be relevant even though the sensitive information type is relevant for them. So we are working on addressing this by allowing you to customize the sensitive information types to define whether they are shown or not, or at what threshold they are shown in the Content Explorer. So essentially, you tell us what matters to you, and you can exclude not only the sensitive information types that don't matter, but also the levels of sensitivity that do not matter for the ones that you do care about. That is still work in progress. It's not something we announced at Ignite this time, but it's something we are working on and that we expect to have later on this year.
Fantastic. Mavi, one of the questions that we see, we've got a roundtable session coming up later at Ignite where we're bringing business decision makers together and we're talking about compliance strategy. And one of our focuses, one of our core values is to be customer obsessed. What are some of the executive asks that are driving your attention right now and that of your team for development, for documentation, for really kind of the mind share as your team moves forward?
Basically, what we're asking for is, holistic solution that will work across platform devices and everywhere. And we're trying to look at the bigger picture and not just, going per just one customer ask. What will serve our customers better? If we'll do this, how many customers will benefit from if we, one feature or two features? And we need them to work across all our solutions and more integrations that we're doing that will help our customers. For example, the endpoint signals that are used by insider risk management. This is something that we built to help our customers, and we're looking to integrate more and more use cases and scenarios. And this is what drives us. The customer is always top of mind for us, and what we can do to make our customers' life easier, secured, and productive.
Fantastic. So we are coming to the end of our session today. There has been a lot of great content from Ignite. If you haven't used the backpack feature, go save some of the sessions into your backpack, go back, watch some of these on-demand sessions, and also check out the announcements. Raman, 15 seconds, what is the one key announcement you wish everybody would go read on insider risk?
Analytics. That's the one that is the most important.
Fantastic. Mavi, same question. One announcement. What should everybody go read?
Oh my God, the keynote and the co-auth that we just released today.
Fantastic. So that is going to wrap us up. We are going to look at some of the questions that are available in the chats for the next few minutes and send some written replies. If you didn't get your question answered today, join some of our roundtable sessions. These are more interactive. We'd love to have the chance to interact with you.